Thank you for joining us. I'm here with Professor Sonia Rankin. So we're talking about race relations in the United States, and that was, I know we were getting into some statistics before we left off. My question, I think, was the way our system is right now and the precedent instating policies as far as reform, being community college, starting there. How do you see that evolving? Do you feel that that's enough at this point, or do you think he's kind of overdoing it? Because it's 2 years of free community. People were like shocked at that, like, wow, this is great. This is now we don't have to worry about, going 2 years ago. It's tuition free. Right. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you see that evolving?
Well, I think it ties a little bit to this idea of an educated populace. Now, do we need everyone educated to what I do? No, we don't need. There's plenty of me. But we do need an educated populace that's prepared for the careers of the future, for the workforce of the future. We still need people that are creating new ideas. So, what used to be okay, what you used to be able to come out and do with a high school degree now requires a minimum of a bachelor's degree. I was just reading up on this, and the number of people to be executive secretaries requires a bachelor's degree. So it's really changing what the standard is for entering
even the bachelor,
workforce.
Some are saying, even the president said the bachelor is not enough. 4 years of undergraduate.
Yeah, for what we want things to get to. I mean, look at it. Only 3% of the American populace holds a doctorate degree. That involves JDs, PhDs, MDs. Only 3%, only about 9% hold some kind of master's. Completed a master's degree. So getting more people, like thinking about that population that was working in the factories, they need to be retrained, retooled, and introduced to new ways of working. Now, this is why the word community college people struggle with this, not even getting into four-year institutions or research institutions. But what are community colleges providing? Are they providing some basic continuing education? Are they providing tools to be able to work? Mm-hmm. Are they providing tools to be able to work someone else's already decided career for you? Or are they providing the tools to kind of start creating your own work, right? That's really the next area we're going to see growing and expanding to.
Did he leave it up to the states, or is this a federal mandate as far as a community college?
I wish I could recall. I know that it's following a similar pattern like with the Health Care Act, okay, right? That looked at what Massachusetts did and is advocating that because it worked well at the Massachusetts level, let's roll it out to all the states. I think they've looked at the Tennessee model, and they're looking at that to be something to roll out to all the states. Now, here in the state of New Mexico with this lottery scholarship, where any student who graduated from New Mexico high school, there are some caveats, is able to receive access to 8 semesters of college. This is a big deal. So for us here in the state, it's like, well, of course you should do that. Georgia also has a similar policy based out of their lottery. But Georgia's policy has operated a little bit differently than the state of New Mexico. Georgia still requires some minimum entries into it. The state of New Mexico has really opened up their lottery scholarship for everyone. Go, get your degree at a 2-year institution, a 4-year institution. So this is our philosophical space, right? Is higher ed supposed to create a workforce and get you a job? Or is higher ed supposed to help us answer big things we need answered?
So what was his, I'm trying to get into the mind of the president there, or the policymakers that suggested that he did that. Did you think that's a precursor to something else as far as training or something else? Because that was kind of, how did the academia respond to that? What was your feeling in there?
Academia is still struggling with it, right? Because if
they're not sure what that 2 years was.
Well, right. I mean, okay. Oh gosh, this is hard. But at 4-year institutions, they use a lot of those undergraduate tuition dollars to fund the graduate work that happens, right? The research that has to happen at the upper division level will be based off of the training on the undergraduate level. So if those students are being trained elsewhere, if they don't come to you until their junior year, then what happens to the funds that are used to fund graduate students doing areas of research and other areas of scholarship?
In short, you see this turning out okay as far as the community college?
Well, it's going to have, it can, and I say that carefully because there are some ideas that it might hurt our institutions, particularly historically black colleges and universities, mm-hmm, which really work with students that have often been overlooked in other populations. HBCUs have done tremendous work in getting the students who graduate do go on to, there are more of them go on to graduate studies than that come out of non-HBCUs. So looking at that kind of area, right, what happens when they don't have that populace? What happens when that funding goes to other places? What happens to these historic institutions that have been in place over 150 years? I definitely believe that it'll work out because we need it as a base for the whole country.
Correct, yeah. Now I'm going to change gears a little bit. How do you see, or what is in your observation, how have you seen the African American going into the higher education? Has that changed since the president came in 2008? Has there been a little bit more enrollment?
Entering, I probably would, I don't have the exact numbers, but I would not say that his election led to that.
Do you think he inspired more African Americans to go to college? And
oh, I'd say the TV show Different World did that more than anyone, right? It was a TV show about students at a historically black college. Enrollment for black students skyrocketed for the 6 years it was on in the 1990s, but I'm a 90s kid, so I'm all about that. But I think
I remember that show. Yeah, it did do a lot, I think. Yeah.
But what has happened with President Obama has been really, you know, if I think about it, for my own children, for their basic shared history, the president has always been black. They've never known or seen anything different. And if that's the case for my children, it's the case for children, many children all over America. That's their first president that they'll see. That's the sign that hangs at the post office. That's the sign that's hanging at the DMV. Correct. This is the definition. And others then become versions of it. So that has helped with some of the public perceptions. It has not, unfortunately, had the impact that we've wanted to see yet on some of the fundamental levels, the structural things that are already in place on who is pipelined to be ready for college, who is pipelined to have the base things that they need to be competitive.
What would be the conversation, say culturally speaking, what would be the conversation now that we have an African American president? It was a big deal, mind you. All over the world, they took a poll in 22 nations, and out of 22, 17 of them were for President Obama, and this was mostly European countries. You take Mexico, Canada, everyone was for President Obama coming in as a fresh face. Something was changing there. How do you see that change us as a nation, culturally speaking? So what is the conversation as far as education and for the president being African American, and how did that change everything?
Limiting it just to education, because I think for some people, many of the countries, the nations were very excited about it, but they have not been so pleased because the policies have not changed.
And that has to do, that's political.
Right, yeah, that's the political part.
Yeah.
But I have noticed with President Obama, with Attorney General Holder,
Correct.
that particularly with Attorney General Holder really being the spokesman. And, if you think back to the Kennedy brothers, right, how fundamental was it that President John F. Kennedy had Robert Kennedy, who really was telling him these are the things that need to happen at the presidential level concerning civil rights in the South. And I think Eric Holder and President Obama really were good partners together in saying these are the fundamental things happening with black Americans all across America that we can do something about at the federal level. And so I think they were able to use their two positions to support many issues.
Do you feel they did enough as far as civil rights and civil rights causes and stuff? I know when first president came in, the tone was kind of mixed, the way I saw it, from observing from a non-African American. I saw it to be, well, there was a little bit of a division there as far as, well, I don't think he's fully black, so he probably wouldn't be able to relate to all the causes and all the civil rights act, because he didn't grow up in that era. He was, his father is Kenyan, mom is European descent, mainly English. So there was concerns that he would not be able to relate to all the effects of the civil rights prior to the civil rights era and stuff. Do you feel that he has done enough as far as relations in the United States and the cause of civil rights and all that?
Well, in terms of his relationship as a black man in America, he had a different cultural heritage. That's definitely true. But at the end of the day, no one walked up to him and said, hey, I bet you've got a white mom, let me treat you differently. Hey, I bet you're not, you probably have an African father, let me treat you the way I would treat an African descendant. No one ever asks that. They make a guesstimation or a guess off what they see, and they choose to regard you in that manner. It may have changed the way he fundamentally sees things because he may not have heard those stories, but that's why I love his book Dreams from Our Father, where he really talks about what got him to want to connect so closely with the Black community. And so I believe he has a heart for that population.
Let me take another break. We'll come back. We'll restart there. Okay. We'll take a short break and we'll be right back.